And we're live. Good day, Whiskey brothers and sisters, and welcome to Whiskey Book Club's 9th book review and the first edition of Whisky Japan, the essential guide to the world's most exotic whiskeys, by author Dominic Roskrow, right up there. That's the gentleman there. As always, we're honored to have you, the viewer, and our panel with us today, all these cats. My name's Dolph. I'm the founder of the Whiskey Book Club. I'm your host tonight. And for those of you that are new to us, I'll explain a little bit what we're about. We are a group of whiskey geeks that love to share a dram and share our passion for reading, mostly about whiskey or whiskey-related activities. There are other alcohol book clubs out there now, but none that delve so deeply into the topic with the author, this guy up here, there, than us. The choice of our 8th book, really important, based on our ongoing desire to study Japanese whiskey and my lack of knowledge, really. I have a just itty-bitty knowledge in relation to this. So we've been looking forward to this quite a bit. So it's the perfect book for me, and Dom, the perfect author and guest. So our guest of honor tonight, Dom, he's prophetic whiskey writer with approaching 20 books and rewrites, with the most notable of these being the Whiskey Opus, which our good friend Davinda Kaljamo contributed to that one, 1001 Whiskeys to Try Before You Die, the world's best whiskeys, and again, this one right here, Whisky Japan, the essential guide to the world's most exotic whiskey. I said again. Which is, as our author put it, Don, a work of investigative journalism. And we're going to ask him about that in a little bit. He's also the author, or was the editor, of Whiskey Quarterly, Whiskey Magazine, Whiskey Advocate. He's written numerous magazines, newspapers, keeper of the quake, and I'd like an answer to this at one point, a Kentucky Colonel, how someone from Scotland becomes a Kentucky Colonel. Really interested in that. So let's start our roundtable introductions with our names, other platform handles, what's in our glasses, and why we chose that. And we usually start with you, Dom, but I'll put you at the end just so you can see what we do before we put you on the spot. So we're going to go with Cheryl, Dave, Kent, Nick, and me, and then we'll pass it over to you, if that's all right. So you're on there, Cheryl.
Oh, my name's Cheryl. I go by Cheryl's_1 on most social media. This afternoon, I'm confused. Apparently I'm not drinking enough or too much. I've got myself a cocktail going on where I've got some Japanese whiskey in it. We use the Suntory whiskey toki with some coffee and some simple syrup. So it's a nice sort of good afternoon drink.
Excellent. A good pick-me-up. Dave, you're up.
Hey, guys. It's Yukon Dave coming from his basement, as always. So today I'm drinking my last whiskey from Japan that I've actually got, so I'm looking to buy some more. This is the Hibiki Harmony. I got it as a Christmas gift 2019. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Back to Kent.
Hi, my name's Kent. I go by Whiskey_ass on all social medias. And this afternoon, or wow, should be this evening, but we're on early today. We're doing a little Nikia whiskey from the barrel.
That's a very smart one to pick. Very intelligent. We'll see why. Nick, you're up.
Hey there, everyone. It's Nick, Black Hat Whiskey, and this afternoon, I am into a sample that a friend gave me as Yamazaki 18. So that is what I have in the glass tonight.
Nice friend.
And you better savor that for a little while. And we'll put you on now, please, sir.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be a bit of a disappointment. I'm drinking cider because I've got to pace myself, obviously, to get through, because it's now gone 8 o'clock at night here. So I'm aware that I've got to be able to speak, basically. The other reason I actually do have in the next room, but I forgot to bring it because the whole evening ran ahead of me. I have a Dutch rye. I don't own any Japanese whiskey. This might be amazing to a lot of people, but the truth is I don't have any Japanese whiskey in the house. So, and we can't really get it anyway, but we'll talk about all of those things during the evening. So yeah, I'm kind of a bit of a disappointment from the off. Oh, can I also, before anything else, can I also apologize for the ridiculous hair? I'm a bit like Dave Broom in the hair department. That's because we're still in lockdown here. We can't get our hair cut. And also, I'm wearing a Leicester City football shirt because Leicester City are playing today. So, and the day ran ahead, I would have put on a suit and tie and obviously a bowler hat and all the rest of it. But
you're looking fantastic, Dom. You look good. And you don't have to impress anyone here. That shirt's fantastic. The hair's good. Although Kent got his hair cut today the first time.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Oh, cool.
And, yeah, we're
Dom,
trying to
Yeah, an hour ago, my hair was down past the ears, much like yours.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's amazing what you miss, isn't it? I never thought I'd say, because I'm into heavy rock music, so I'm used to having long hair from when I was young, and to me, having a haircut is almost, it's just not a done thing. But I really, really miss it. Every time I do that, I've got gel. You can't tell you how bad it is. It's down here. Yeah. But I've gelled it out the way so that I can not spend all my night playing with my hair.
It's good. It's braided in the back. We can't see a thing.
So you fit in with
That's what I'm going. That's why I thought Kent was so good. But mine's at the end. I'm finishing mine off tonight. This will be gone fairly soon. And I guess I don't have to pace myself. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll just have a nap later, I think, if I need to, which is good for us. And I'm really happy you're here with us, Dom. We talked earlier in the week, so I've been looking forward to this all week. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for asking me. And thank you for turning out at a lot earlier than you normally do for the event. But I mean, it's an honor to be here. It really is.
I think it's a good idea. We've never done this, and our next author also from England. So you know what? You're just preparing us. You're blazing the trails for other authors to come, buddy. We're good. Yeah. One thing. No, well, I'll leave that for later. I'm good. Let's just talk about the book. And because I want to start talking about the book. And I've got to say, it's a beautiful book. And if we've looked through the pages, it is a visually stunning book. I like it a lot. Don, just a quick couple words. Who was in charge of kind of the photo layout? Did you have a big say as to what the design kind of would look like when you do a book that's really visual like this? Or do they not let you and they just say your words and we'll take care of the rest?
No, well, so it's amazing how little support you get when you do a book. I mean, you don't have anybody with any knowledge of whiskey, for instance. So if you write something down and you put it onto the paper, it goes into the book. A lot of the publishing is a difficult place to be because it's an expensive. Books are out of date by the time they appear because it takes 6 months to produce a book. So the internet's providing information a lot quicker. So basically, they suppress the cost. The way they do that is they ask the author to do a lot of the picture stuff, and not all of it, to be fair, but. I'm talking to distilleries, so then I get PR people to send through photography, etc. In terms of the design itself, I'm very fortunate that nearly all my books have appeared on international publishers, HarperCollins, and the big companies. Yep. So that means they have more resources than many, and they tend to take on a designer. So when I did the world's best whiskies, they flew a guy over from America, from LA, and he was pure designer. I said, well, you can't use that glass in that picture because I'll decide the design, not you. I said, yeah, but it's not a whiskey glass. I don't care, he said. And what he did with that book was the best. And sometimes when I'm depressed, I go and get that book and just look at the design. It's absolutely amazing. And that's because he was just so talented. He took the glass that you shouldn't use and had a distillery through it. So when you look at the picture, you see the distillery through the glass, and you forget entirely that the glass is inappropriate. It's not really a whiskey glass. So I've been fortunate. The other thing I would say is that I started off in newspapers, and back then, if a sub-editor cut the last paragraph off the story, I'd have a hissy fit because it was all about words to me, and pictures were something that went next to your words. Yeah, that's not how it is nowadays. More than ever, design is everything, and writers aren't designers. So I'm not creative in an artistic way at all. So although I source a lot of photos, all my books I think have been really well, with the exception of 1001 Whiskies, which was basically just a picture of a bottle on each page. But the best books I've done, the Opus, this one, Whisky America, and the World's Best Whiskies, that one's just been designed brilliantly. So I can't claim credit for that.
Nice.
So
Well, no, we're going to give it to you. You did.
So that picture's not yours, Dom?
No, I didn't take that picture. No.
Okay. I did a tasting last night for an insurance company, and it was from Winnipeg to Grand Prairie, which is quite a
distance.
wide area. Yeah. And one of the guys had that as his background.
Oh,
Nice.
wow.
Nice.
Well,
I
that's
said,
kind
"Hey,
of cool.
I said, hey, where'd you get that? He goes, I got it on the internet. I said, what kind of barrels are those? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, look at them. They're Yamazaki barrels. So
See, look at how much research you've done already, Dave.
Yeah.
well, that's it for the show now, eh?
No, you're good, man. You're golden.
We're done. We're out. Have a good night.
I'm done. I did it. Dom, we're going to talk about your forward for a second, because
Yeah.
I would really like to know, when you're picking your forward, are you picking the individual for some strategic reason, or are they just a good friend, or is it a combination of the two?
That's a good question, really. It's a combination of the two, really. I mean, this one, I have done the best research I've done for this book was done with Miyamoto. So I think I hold him up in high regards. I think that to have an intro by someone who'd been at the helm at Suntory for so long made him the obvious choice. There are other people I could have used. I could have used my very good friend Martin Miller. I don't know if you know Martin, but Martin was the publishing director. He recruited me into whiskey. That's how I got into whiskey. He was the publishing director at Whiskey Magazine, and he recruited me as an editor. And Martin is in that book, actually. You won't have reached it yet, but you'll find I talked to kind of a certain number of people who were there when it all happened, and Martin is one of them. And Martin's story is that he became very good friends with Chichibu and the people behind Chichibu, and he ended up buying all the last Karazawa and Hanyu. And he gave on my 50th birthday, this is 9 years ago, I'm 59 now. On my 50th birthday during the Rugby World Cup, he gave me a bottle of Karazawa. And because the World Cup was live from New Zealand, it was happening at breakfast time here. So I said to my friends, you come to my house for the rugby, I'll give you a dram at the start, a dram at half time, a dram at the end. Perfect. And we finished that bottle of Karazawa over the 3 weeks of the Rugby World Cup. And it sold for £23,000 recently.
Holy crow.
Wow.
And Martin said to me, he said, well, who would have known? I said, well, you did, because you bought up all the stock. Anyway, he's now, he lives in my county, he lives in Norfolk. Nobody sees him anymore because he's swanning around in an old Bentley, being Lord of the Manor. He's, you know, he actually invested his money in Japan's first gin distillery. So he owns Japan's, and I can't think of its name, but he owns it. So Martin could have done the intro because he was the guy in charge of sending journalists to Japan, in Dave Broom being the best example in 2001. Yeah. But I just felt Mike was better. Having said that, when I did the 1001 Whiskies, I got Jim Murray to do it. That was hard work. I know he's very popular in Canada, isn't he?
Yes,
and
talk about him a lot.
It's funny because there's a kind of a joke. I don't know if it's a Canadian joke, but it's a British joke that when you're really at the end of your career, you say you're big in Japan. Nostalgia sells in Japan, and that's how a lot of people over here think about Japan with his Canadian links. But anyway. Jim and I get on with him better than most people. I on the back of his book it says Jim Murray is the best whiskey writer in the world, and that's my quote. It says by Dominic Roskrow. So I'm very proud of that. I look up to him as a writer. I know the controversies, I know all the stories, and I don't want to go there. But golly, he was hard work to get, even though, because basically there's a side to Jim Murray that maybe not a lot of people know, and that's, am I allowed to talk about this sort of thing?
Yeah.
This is more of an after dram kind of conversation, but that's perfect. This is
Okay.
great.
Well,
I like
just interrupt me. I go off piste. I have psychophilia, which means I've got a very active mind, and I don't do any scripts, but I don't know what I'm going to say next. So you have to interrupt if I'm going well. The thing is, Jim, he after he'd been doing the Whiskey Bible for some time, he asked for a pay increase because it was selling so well, and the publisher said no. He said, "Well, I'm not going to write it anymore then." And a few weeks later, the phone rings, and it's a distillery in Scotland saying there's a bloke here called John Smith, whatever it was. He says he's the Jim Murray Whiskey Bible and he wants samples. And it turned out that Jim had signed a contract by which the words Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible was owned by the publisher. So if he didn't write it, they could recruit me or anybody else to do it instead, which is exactly what they did. So he started a court case to get his name back, basically. And it nearly bankrupted him. I went to stay with him to write a story about him, and he had no furniture in his house, nothing, because he refused to buy anything for himself until he paid back everybody he owed money to. But he won the court case. But unsurprisingly, Jim Murray doesn't sign anything that's got copyright issues. So if that 1001 Whiskies book is going to sell outside the UK and it's sold all over the world,
yeah,
he wants a separate contract agreement. So I had a nightmare with him because I obviously couldn't even tell him what territories it was going to go in. I pleaded with him. Funnily enough, he was in Canada in winter. It was after the Bible came out. I think he comes to Canada around January, February time. And I was trying to speak to him from all sorts of godforsaken places where he'd been snowed in or he hadn't been able to get onto a computer. But I chose him because I thought he was one of the few authorities on whiskey I look up to. I don't really use books when I research books. I don't use books at all, really. But Jim, I have used his books on bourbon. And I thought on that one, I thought it'd be good for my credibility to have Jim Murray involved. Don't ask me if I'd make the same decision again.
Yeah. Well, you and I talked about this last week, and I'll try to bring it up during the after dram because you had a lot of interesting things to say about his verbiage and the words he uses and the obvious effect of it. So it's good. It's nice to have this. But I'm getting back to Whisky Japan, and because you said this was a work of investigative journalism, so I'd like you to try to talk about that a little bit. So I've got a quote right here. So. You hope to give the reader a sense of sophistication, nuance, quality of Japanese whiskey, and create a starting point for many who have heard of it but are yet to be seduced by it. And that's kind of me as well. So, Dom, why a work of investigative journalism as opposed to, let's say, a definitive guide of Japanese whiskey?
It's another very good question, really. The thing is that. When I joined Whiskey Magazine, and Whisky Japan was the first of their live shows they did. They now do them all over the place. But the first one was Japan, and Dave Broom, Michael Jackson, and Mark. Can you still see me? Because I'm suddenly big on my screen.
Oh, I made you very large. I like that. I wanted to focus on you for a little while. You're the man of honor. Here you go.
Oh, okay. It's concerning because I can see myself and I don't like it.
All right, here, I'll put you back.
So anyway, they used to fight each other to get on the plane. So I didn't go to Japan a lot. And it would be a lie to pretend that I'm an authority on Japanese whiskey. It's really ironic that of all the books, the one that I knew the subject least about was the one that's fated like this, and not just this. It comes back to me time and time and time again. Yeah, and in a sense, it's probably the nearest book to what I'm from. I came from a newspaper background, and so you go to work in the morning, and they'd send you to do a story on. It could be a fire at a rubber plant. A factory making rubber gloves. and you wouldn't know anything about what rubber did or how it burns or what. You wouldn't know how many people had been hurt. You wouldn't know how bad the smoke was and how dangerous it was. And that's what a journalist, when you study journalism, that's what you do. They give you a brief, and it says there's been a gas explosion on a boat. Go and report it, and you have to go and interview the fire officer or the police officer and come back with a story. And there's always a twist, and the twist in that particular one, which is what I actually did, was that he'd actually had a similar gas leak the week before, and the people who were on the boat hadn't changed the gas oven, so it exploded and killed him. But the company was negligent because they already knew. So that was the twist. But you could get through by just getting the story. The reason I say that is that's what I mean by investigative journalism. This book was, I don't know an awful lot about the subject. I certainly haven't spent an awful lot of time in Japan. I don't speak Japanese. Japanese traditionally don't give up industrial commercial secrets. They're very, very close to the chest, very company bound, so they don't really need journalists or writers. So I need to go and ask people, and I have to ask experts. And I can't be the authority if I'm quoting other experts as the authority. So that's what I meant. So I effectively, what I wanted to do was tell a story about how in 1999, whiskey in the West was zero, and by 2015 it was hero. That's exactly what I tried to do. And that's what I think I've done. But I've done it because I've asked other people who know more about it than I do.
And you refer to the blog website Nonjata. Is that how I pronounce it? Nonjata a few times?
Yeah.
Quite a bit, actually, in the first 10th of the book that we've read, the first 3 chapters we went through. Why do you put so much faith in that site? Or in the chief editor, Stefan van Eycken, I think it is?
Yeah.
Again,
that's very perceptive. The thing is that when I came to do it, I found that there's a guy who's written a book. I can't remember his name, but he's in there as well, called Drinking Japan.
Okay.
Stefan's in there. You'll get to the chapter where I actually interview them as eyewitnesses from that time. Marchin's in there. When I contacted Stefan, firstly, he lives in Tokyo.
Okay.
But when I told him what I was doing, I didn't know he was planning to write a book. And he more or less said, you won't be able to do it. Because I've been here 4 years. I speak Japanese. I've been to every distillery. Getting information is like getting blood out of a stone.
Okay.
And you can't do it from that distance. And I said, but I'm going to do it like a Lonely Planet guide. I'm going to do it as a book that says, here's the subject. This is what it is. This is where you can taste it. These are the brands that maybe you could try. And if you want information and you open your mind to it, the book's a lovely book, great gift, great for an entry level. But if you really want to know what's going on in this, you need to go to Dave Broom or to Stefan, because Dave's been any number of times. He doesn't speak Japanese either, but he does edit the Japanese Whisky magazine. And he works with a guy called David Kroll, who's another founding member of the Whisky magazine scene. And he translates it. So I just felt it was a little bit embarrassing to take credit for being. See, the joke is, I couldn't be the best, so I had to be the first, and I was the first.
Done.
But I don't think Bruce will ever get over it because his book's far better than mine. But
too bad.
I think a lot of people will buy his book because I'm quite happy to acknowledge that.
And yours came out 2016. Broom's was 2019, I think, or was it 18? Do you remember?
No, I don't. To be honest,
it's a gigantic tome as well. Same thing, big, beautiful tome. These are all beautiful books. I think.
Yeah, well, see, Dave's another one that he's very serious. You know, do you know who Liam Gallagher is? The singer.
No.
Well, Liam Gallagher is the trashy singer of Oasis, or was.
Okay.
And he was a bit of a lad, you know. And there was a big thing in the UK between Blur and Oasis to be the Christmas #1. So when I heard Dave had a book coming out at the same time as me, I don't know what book it was. I rang him up and I said, Dave, are you and me going to be Oasis versus Blur for the Christmas #1? And he says, if we are, you're Liam Gallagher. And he meant it as an insult.
But not to you.
No, not at all, because I'm very populist, very trashy, very easy to read, accessible. He's the man with the detail, with the absolute precision. You know, he's a far better taster than I am. I don't like his writing, particularly because it's not my style of writing, but everyone says he's a prosaic writer, so we're just very different. But I just didn't want to try. I've never been dishonest. I've never... it's what I'm known for more than anything is transparency. And so I wasn't going to claim. In fact, Dave and I haven't spoken for years, and there's a little bit of antagonism there, I think. But I did give him a credit in the credits at the back of that book, even though I never spoke to him for it.
Well, you are very honest. Not too many people would have brought up the Whiskey Bible at this point in time, and you brought it up, and you just right out. I love that. That's good.
Well, the thing is that it's a lovely family we're in, and I don't know how it is in Canada, but
much as it is, it's a family, sure.
Yeah, and the last year everyone's talked about be kind and etc. And I just think, to be honest, life's too short to. There's a couple of people on social media who are so up themselves, and you just think, where do you get off to? Who do you think you're talking to? And I can't be bothered with it. I really can't. So,
I've come across that a lot lately when we look at, the states and people calling the Trump supporters sheep, which I've done. Many people. There's sheep, but then the comment came out, and it was Robin Robinson that came out with the comment, or Lou Bryson, one of the two. He said, we're all sheep. Everyone's got their own people that they follow and they push, and they don't like the others, and they call someone else sheep. So I kind of like that perspective. It's good. Panel, I'm going to go to you guys for a second, because Dom told us that he didn't know a whole bunch about Japanese whiskey before he started. And I want to know where you guys are. I know where I am. If I'm putting myself on a 1 to 10, I knew like 2. What do we got? Dave, how much did you know about Japanese whiskey before you started the book? Oh, sorry, bud. You are muted. I did that. That's my fault. I muted you because I had sounds in the background, buddy.
Yeah, so I knew very little about Japanese whiskey because it's kind of a mystery. But I've told the story before on this show. My first Japanese whiskey, I walked for miles in the rain in Vancouver and stopped at a bar soaking wet. And the owner bought me a drink, and it was a Japanese whiskey, and it tasted so good that I bought it when I got home. And when I tried it at home, it tastes better when you're cold and wet and in a different province. That one didn't taste so hot once I owned it. But yeah, it's the whole mystery about this thing. It's exciting. And we all did a whiskey tasting on the Japanese whiskey like a week ago. So yeah.
Well, I think it was 3, but it doesn't matter. We're having another one in 3 weeks. So Cheryl. Well, both of you, Cheryl and Mr. Whiskey asked, both of you, what do you think?
I think we're both kind of in the same boat where Japanese whiskey is still pretty new to us. We've, sampled a few, but then the thing is, it's that hidden mystery. You see them on the shelf, you really have no idea what they taste like. So you don't just grab them just in case. So you kind of tend to walk past them because you don't know a lot about them. So I think it's just kind of coming to head now with us having the tasting and, the book. There's just more information available to us to learn more.
Well, if you don't recognize the names, it's hard to slap down $100 to do it. Yeah. Although we've all done that for various times in our lives, and a lot more than that, actually. But still, it's hard.
My introductory to Japanese whiskey.
Yep.
And I remember opening it up and having my first dram of it and going, this is absolute swill. and it went on the shelf for many months. And then all of a sudden I was watching a video on Japanese whiskey, and they're saying, yeah, no, this is cocktail whiskey. And after work, they go to the bar and they socialize and they make cocktails out of this. So cha-ching, right? The lights came on. It was like, yeah, it's not designed to be a sipping whiskey. It's designed for cocktails. And hence that's why we made our
cocktail with that.
I've been whiskey for people just getting into whiskey, though. I find it light, I find it floral, and for someone just starting whiskey, I thought that was a good one to try.
And that's her flavor.
Which one are you talking about?
The
Toki.
the Toki.
Bring it down.
Oops.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
The square bottle, it fits really well on the shelves for the mixers. Yeah. Nick, how about you?
I think I've been exposed a little bit more because we all have a friend here in the city, Lee, who's a beekeeper, and he ships his honey over to Japan. And pre-COVID, he would travel to Japan and interact with that market. So he would always say, "Oh, this is what I'm drinking," or "You need to try this." So when I would go shopping and take pictures and send, he's like, "No, don't drink that. No, don't buy that. No, don't." It's like, no, that's not the real stuff. So I've had a little bit of that guidance, but at the same point, we're not getting what that initial whiskey spirit that was being provided. We're getting what is now coming to market. So it's that interesting comparison. He's been tasting it for 10, 12 plus years, so he has quite the palate. So when he tries to explain something to me, you're sort of like, what? Like, what does that taste like? How do you get that here? Like, how do you understand where that spirit has now progressed to? Because that's what we're now tasting, is that progression.
And we missed that golden window. We really did. We came into the Japanese whiskey way too late. So if we could afford what you have in your glass right now, Nick, that bottle itself, it's a tasty morsel and it's expensive. Dom, here, I got this right here. Japanese whiskeys have an extra problem not faced by the likes of Ireland and the United States. They're whiskeys that are made the same way as Scotland's, making direct comparisons unavoidable. So, Panel and Dom, do you think that this is still a problem where that it's a problem being compared to a lot of Scotch or other whiskeys in the States because they do outshine? Some of their whiskeys are fantastic, and we've had some. Or do you think no matter what they do, you're going to have the Scotch snobs that are not going to like what they do regardless because it's not Scotch?
You're always going to have those Scotch snobs, and I really don't like. They can stay drinking their Scotch. I mean, this show has opened my eyes and my palate to so much stuff. Like my fondness for Canadian whiskey changed so much from our first book.
Yeah.
And I look at this book here that we've got from Dom is this is opening my eyes to one of my next loves here. So
excellent. Thank you very much.
I think Dave's hit it there. You're going to always have your snobs, and you leave them off in the corner. They can go drink their Scotch. I think also, though, too, is a lot of the drinkers are moved by marketing. And Japan and Japanese whiskeys haven't been marketed to the same extent in North America, particularly, as Scotch or Irish or bourbon or American or even now starting Canadian. So if it's not marketed, people aren't recognizing it, and it creates that whole little cycle. People aren't recognizing it, people aren't picking it up, and we don't get as much of it because it's not sold as much, and we miss out.
Dom, do you think the same thing now than you did in 2016, so 5 years ago?
That's a good question. I got a love-hate relationship with Japanese whiskey. I think the thing is, you've got to bear in mind, so you could almost call the book Japanese Whiskey and How You Missed It, because you're not the only ones. You're not the only ones. The rest of what, because I'll tell you a very quick story. I won't get distracted too long, but basically I used to do a day a week in a whiskey shop, which is part of a chain. There's a chain in the UK called the Whisky Shop chain, and they had 20 shops. And one in Norwich was open specifically for me to use as a tasting base. So I had a manager in there, but I would relieve him one day a week. And Wednesday is a particularly quiet day, and we had 4 bottles of Yamazaki 18-year-old, which is arguably the best Japanese whiskey in the world ever, and one of the best whiskeys I've ever tasted ever. Yeah, you're a very fortunate lady, you really are. But in fact, I'm quite jealous. But because we only had 4 bottles, and it was £75 a bottle, whatever that is in Canadian dollars, I don't know, but
About $170.
Hey,
$170, bit over double.
okay. So we couldn't afford to open a bottle because obviously once open, you'd have to give it all away. There was only 3 other bottles to sell.
Yeah.
So it sat on the shelves doing nothing for months. Then one day, a bloke came in. He said, "Have you got any Yamazaki 18-year-old?" I said, "I've got 4 bottles." He said, "I'll buy them all." So I was delighted. I thought, fantastic, £300 on a quiet day, that on a quiet Wednesday. At about 2:00 in the afternoon, the phone rang. It was the central office. They said, "You've got to double the price of your Yamazaki 18-year-old from £75 to £145, nearly double."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, we haven't got any." He says, "You're down on the records having 4. I said, "Yeah, it's funny because a bloke came in this morning and bought it." And he must have known. He must have known what he was doing. But now you look at the price of it and we're on to another scale. So it ran out. It all ran out. Dave Broom and Michael Jackson and all the rest were giving these reviews, and it ran out. All of that great whiskey ran out to the point that Nika cancelled all their age statement whiskies just to make their 2 non-age statement whiskies, because otherwise they'd have gone bankrupt, because they would have had to reserve stock to service the 18-year-old market, and they didn't have enough. So Japanese whiskey became very elusive, just like you say it is in Canada. It is here. You don't see it. But also what was happening here, we don't obviously have the same problems you have with liquor stores. You have all the issue of being put on lists and stuff, don't you?
Yeah.
Am I right in that? Does that affect you?
In Alberta, yes. In Ontario and BC, it's much like yours, but in different provinces. So different provinces have different rules. Ours is privatized. So
But the point is still the same. We're not getting stuff through Japan. And then what's also true is there's like loads and loads of really ordinary, not great whiskey on sale in Japan. Much cheaper, not very good. And of course, some businessman thinks Japanese whiskey hit potential. I'll import it into the UK, and everyone goes, "Japanese whiskey at a price I can afford," and they buy it, and it's garbage.
Yeah.
So the thing is that it's only at the very what is that? Can't say
it. Like what you're talking about. I bought it for the same reason, and I put it in a blend. In my cocktail later.
Yeah.
Just to support exactly what you're saying.
I'm talking about. And so what we're looking at is, if you want, is the tip of an iceberg that was really, really good quality ice, really great quality ice, and somebody's chopped that off, and now the iceberg's floated up a bit, and the next chunk is salty and horrible. So what happened here was because Japan was never my first subject, I became known for writing about New World whiskey and whiskey from new areas. I let Davin, as you pointed out, do Canada because he was the best. I have a guy in Germany because he knew German whiskey and I don't speak German. But the rest of the world was open season to me, and I absolutely made a career of freelancing, writing about Taiwan and Australia, New Zealand, France, and I call it New World whiskey, anywhere that's not conventional. And I still argue that over 12 years old, Scotland and Japan are hard to fault. But once you get down to the under 10 years old, I'd rather to be drinking Taiwanese or Indian or Australian. I've got a Dutch rye sitting in the next room, which I meant to pour for this, and I didn't get time. I'd much rather drink that. So Japanese, and we've become kleptomaniacs. We're all we're magpies. We're not loyal to one brand. So when Japan was out of sight, it was out of mind. And loads and loads of other countries have said, "Well, have you tried Amrit? Have you tried Kavalan? We're from Asia. And I don't know where Japan goes from there. I don't know where it's come back." So in a sense, my timing for that book was ideal because I'm not sure it'd be even written today.
Because it's hard to get, but I'm going to supplement that question with something else. So going back to page 12, the one thing I saw was the footnotes, and I don't know if the panel really reads the footnotes, but you have one on page 12 that talks about the labels and how they're very misguiding with their labels because they could say small batch, they could say anything really, and there was no organization holding them to the facts. And I'm wondering how much do you know now about the labels now with I don't know. With the new regulations that have come out, have they addressed labels as part of that? I know the overarching what makes the Japanese whiskey, but have they addressed what the labels have to look like and anything like that? Do you know?
Oh, well, the problem with that question is that, so I wanted to write a column for a magazine called Out There.
Okay.
You see, I'm working in a partnership with a company called Seven Seals, Swiss company. What they've got this ability to power up whiskey. So they go through a process only using oak and only using the same ingredients that a barrel would use, but they can make a whiskey of 3 years old taste like it's 15-year-olds in about a month. It's amazing.
Yeah, we've heard about that.
And they've got a process that they do it with, and they've patented it. Now, I'm working with them as a consultant, and we're using an Irish spirit, right? Okay. But we could take new make Irish spirit, make, call it Pachine, because Pachine is unmalted, it's an unmatured product, and we could say Irish Pachine finished in the Swiss Alps. We could call it that. We could come up with a name. We could call it Paddy St. Bernard or something, St. Bernard or something, I don't know. Because the rules are very, very vague. This is a bit of a long-winded answer, but you've got to understand we have now just left Europe. So the 3-year-old rule for Europe was brought to the attention of the European Union by the Scots and the Irish, and the European Union adopted it. There's nothing to stop the UK importing 1-month-old bourbon now, or 1-month-old American rye. It's nothing, because we're not bound by European law. And Scotland would never allow it in Scotland because of quality and everything else.
Yeah.
But okay, so I've seen a bottle with the words New Zealand bourbon on them. I know that one of the products we're doing has the word single on it, and it's not single process because it's an Irish distillery and a Swiss finish. So it can't be a single distillery. So there's a lot. I wanted a column called Out There because I think there's going to be a whole new category of innovative drinks. But what needs to happen is the purity of what whiskey is kept removed from that. So people don't pass off stuff as whiskey when it's 1 month old, or call something a bourbon when it's clearly not from America.
Yeah.
Well, not even Kentucky, America in general, because they make bourbon anywhere in America, but they can't make it anywhere else. And on we go. So nobody's policing that. That's what, in fact, Australia, the whiskey, they changed the law so that you could call your product anything you liked at any age. And the whiskey producers went back and said, we want the 3-year rule because we don't want our product to be seen as inferior by the Scots. Okay. So they insist, they actually brought it on and they policed themselves, if you like. So the question you're asking is very, very valid. But I assume one of the reasons that Japan's going through the process it is at the moment is because it's getting to the point where it could export again. Because it's maturing whiskey and has been ever since the crisis first struck. That book was written 5 years ago, so they've got 5-year-old whiskey. So I don't know, and it's a really hot topic because I've seen in Las Vegas, I saw American champagne. You can't have American champagne, you know. It's not, and they don't care because they're not really exporting it anywhere. This guy, I'm sorry to waffle on. I have a very young relative. His name's Joel Bailey, but he thinks Roskrow is a cool name, so he calls himself DJ Roskrow. Okay. And we got in touch with each other. It turns out he's the son of a cousin of mine, and he's a real cool guy. He's in his 20s. He's a DJ and he does all hit stuff. And he sends me his music, and I say, "Listen, man, if I like it, you're in trouble because I'm 59." You really don't want Grandad to like your whiskey, your music. But anyway, he contacted me to say, could I review his whiskey, his major-made whiskey?
Okay.
I thought, you can't make whiskey in Bedfordshire. So I said, yeah, of course I will. So I contacted him, never heard another word. Why? Because the guy who's making that stuff isn't making whiskey.
No.
And he knows anybody serious about whiskey would spot it a mile off. So they've lost interest in talking to me. I know I'll never hear from them again. So that's what I'm saying. All of this stuff's happening. You know, there's all sorts happening, but nobody's policing it properly. So Japanese are going the other way, which is great.
Well, I'm hoping, because I don't know what I'm looking for. It really is. When you go shopping and you see something and you see single malt, great, but maybe it's not their single malt. Maybe it's the single malt from Scotland that they bought and brought over and maybe finished in Mezzanera. Oh, just and if we could see a label and be able to trust a label, that would go a long way, I think, for people wanting to buy it. But maybe they don't care. Maybe they want people like me to buy this the one time and never have to buy it again, and try another 3 that one time and never buy it again. And maybe they're just not going for the person that wants to devote themselves to one brand anymore.
Yeah, but you see,
I don't know if that's a thing.
But what I'd say to you is this, that I remember once having a debate, a row, with a major company who said that my criticism of their non-age statement whiskey, and it was Scotch, wasn't fair because it wasn't aimed at me. I said, what do you mean that not aimed at me? He said, it's for an entry-level drinker, and it's just, you know, it's not complex. I said, you mean it's aimed at somebody who doesn't know any better? That's what you're saying. You're saying it's an inferior product that the bloke won't notice. Now, I think I get sent samples of single. In fact, I work for 3 companies now, and my job is basically to assess cask samples for whether they can be bottled or not. One of the other ones I'm working for is launching in 2 weeks, and it's called Fable. And they sent me 20 samples of Diageo casks aged 12 to 15 years old. And they were like lemon juice. They were so thin, see-through, so colour. And they tasted like they'd been in the cars for 10 minutes. But they would have names on them, you know, that from Diageo. So I rejected them, obviously. But there are people buying those casks, which are surplus from Diageo, and bottling them as single malt whiskies and making a quick buck. And unfortunately, who is doing the reason I'm being paid to do the job for these 3 companies is because they don't want to be like that. And they think, 1, Dom Roskrow will probably know what he's talking about. And 2, if he endorses that product, it gives it credibility. So that's where I am now, because the journalism side is very, very difficult with the industry shut down. It's been bad. Last year was a really nasty year. So as it was for everybody, I know. But it's a race to the bottom. I think there are people just prepared to sell snake oil. That's what it is.
Is this just independent bottlers? Because I love my independent bottlers, but you have ones that you trust more than others as well.
Absolutely right. And I launched Whisky Magazine some 20 years ago now. I launched the Independent Bottlers Challenge, because the problem with independent bottlings is by the time Whisky Magazine appeared, the bottle had sold out.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do was to taste regularly the same bottlers. So we got to know that Gordon MacPhail was strong in some areas, and Duncan Taylor was strong in some areas, and on we go. And you're absolutely right. You start to get to know independent bottlers, and you know that they're particularly good in Islay. So if you get an independent bottler, you've got the way I look at it is this. I remember once I was doing a Friday night tasting, and I got to Whiskey 5 of Islay whiskies, and I hadn't tasted anything from Islay. So I decided it was my palate. I decided my palate was just not in the mood. The 6th one was wonderful. And it turned out that the other 5 were bad because they were just bad. And you can understand that a good cask of Ardbeg. No, that's not a good example, because Glenmorangie never sold off their whiskies to single independents. But say Lagavulin.
Yeah, they do.
The only reason that Lagavulin ends up in an independent bottling is because the company has rejected it. You think about it. They're going to put the best Lagavulin into single malts, and then they're going to put it out into the blending market. And if it's surplus to requirements in the blending market, independent bottlers get hold of it. So sometimes I always say it's like I don't know why I always say Bruce Springsteen, but to me it's like Bruce Springsteen. Your official releases are the official albums, but your independent bottlings are bootlegs, and a lot of them are going to be inferior sound quality, recorded on a phone, lots of noise in the background, not very good. But occasionally you get this absolute killer, must-have, best Bruce Springsteen concert in years in the independent sector as a bootleg. That's how I feel about independence, and I totally agree with you. But we've got pubs bottling. There's a pub called the Fisherman's Retreat. 3 years in a row, they've sent me their annual bottling. I'm good on them for trying to do it. I think it's great that you can go in a pub and have a whiskey that's bottled by the pub.
Yeah.
But this really shouldn't be sending it to me because it's not very good. So
I'd still try it no matter what. Any pub that has their own independent bottling, I'm trying it.
Yeah. And you know what? Good on them for trying, and maybe they just, but that's the other thing. I'm not trying to call rank. I'm really not trying to call rank, but I have tasted. I've always said that Jim Murray might be Jimi Hendrix, but you put me in a shed with a guitar for 8 years, I'll come out a very good guitarist, but I won't be Jimi Hendrix. It's not natural to me. I just practice more than anybody else, but I have practiced a lot. So I have tasted a lot of whiskey. So I don't want to call rank, but it may be the case that what I taste in that whiskey, most other people are quite happy with.
Right.
And but I personally wouldn't buy it or review it because I don't want to upset them because they're trying to do something for their business, So I'm not the person to come to. But do you see my point? So we drifted a long way from where we were. Weren't we talking about labels?
It was labels 15 minutes ago. I'm really not sure anymore.
Actually, I have a tie-in for that.
Please.
You had talked about some of the different people, groups, even a industry that you're, or a group that you're working with, doing a modification on how they produce a whiskey. I think it sounds a lot similar to something I've heard about in the US called Terra Pure, where they age it through the chemical process and whatnot.
No.
No? Oh, okay, different.
Totally different. I wouldn't be involved in that to save my life. I don't believe that the Scots spent 1,000 years and went to the expense of oak barrels and everything else, given the joke about the Scots. If there was an easier way to do it, there isn't. But what there is that the late Dr. Jim Swan has worked with distilleries all over the world. I'm just about to announce my Wizards results. I did my own awards. And the winner for the English Distillery of the Year is Cotswolds. Their whiskey's 4 years old.
Yeah.
It takes 10 to 12 years in the cold and damp climate of Scotland. But this, even down here in Norfolk, where I am now, which is halfway down in the east, our whiskey matures faster than Scotland's does. Cotswolds is another 200 miles south, and it definitely does. But he's done it in Israel. He's done it in Wales, Jim Swan, and he did it by tweaking the existing methods. Now, the Swiss company doesn't use barrels, but it does use wood. It uses the wood that's taken off the barrel when it's made. And the three things that happen when you mature whiskey are you impart flavor and color to the spirit from the wood. Mm-hmm. The wood takes out impurities, including sulfur, but tannins and some of the sharper notes. And then there's a marriage between the two sides that create all the flavors that obviously oak and spirit can't create, but the magic happens. All of that happens in this process. But what they do is they do it by using wood and treating the wood to take out all the negatives, just as whiskey would over a few years. They then toast it at a relatively low temperature for a very, very long time. Okay. So that it imparts vanillins and all flavors much quicker. Because in Scotland or Ireland, they'll put a barrel over intense heat for a minute, not for very long, and it burns the inside of the barrel, which is fine, except for you can get carcinogens. It's possibly burnt wood can have carcinogen properties. It doesn't really, but the fact is, it's a very brutal way of charring the inside of the cask. What Dolph does, what the Swiss company does, is does that process.
Dolph is another person that he works for. There's another Dolph in the world.
Dolph is Dr. Dolph Stockhausen is the German Swiss owner of Seven Seals. The reason I'm working with them, anyway, the point is it is only using. So what he does is he toasts the wood for a long period of time. He then soaks the wood in port or sherry, and he can control the interaction between the spirit and the wood. But there's nothing involved. There's no additions. There's no chemicals. There's none of this. Somewhere in Silicon Valley in Las Vegas, or it's not that. I've seen people use tea bags, and they put in oak shavings and chemicals in a tea bag, and that puts the flavor into the spirit. Well, there's no molecular structure to that, and you haven't withdrawn anything out of it, so it just can't work. So it's nothing like that. And the reason I got involved with this company is because I went to Zurich and I did a tasting, and we had 50 something whiskies blind, all tasted blind, and I put a ring round 2. And I went up to the organizer and said, these are just absolutely sublime. They're off the scale when compared to the one before and the ones before. And he said, they're both from the same place. And that's why I contacted them. But that's another story. The point is that it's, to me, it's just saying that the barrel isn't the most efficient way of making, I call it a deconstructed oak aging process. And what they were doing, and I wouldn't do, was taking new make and then calling it whiskey after 4 weeks. I said I want the spirit to be whiskey before we do it, and then we finish it. So we don't have a maturing process; we have a finishing process. So we're using 3.5-year-old, 4-year-old Irish whiskey, and then doing this process and launching it soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, look at the time. It's done. That is our whiskey book club for tonight. We have done our hour. We've only talked about, I think, 3 or 4 different for questions, but Dom, we've learned lots. It's fantastic. It's been a fun start to our afternoon, to your evening, where you are. We're moving our conversation from this, I guess I'll call it more formalized format, to a more relaxed but equally engaging and probably more colorful conversation in the After Jam. Now, author Dominic Roskrow wrote right here of Whisky Japan, the essential guide to the world's most exotic whiskey.
Oh,
might very well be with us today. When we come back to the After Jam, he might not. He might have to eat. We don't know. We're taking him out of his normal rhythm, so we'll see if he joins us in a bit.
I'll join you for a little bit. I'll see what I can do. I need to sort out some food or something.
Well,
I just want to say, can I just say a big thank you to you all? I have to say, you're absolutely right what you said at the beginning. You're definitely a really interesting whiskey club, one of the best I've ever spoken to. And the questions, I really was impressed with the questions. And thanks for sending them early as well, because I think I would have been a little bit surprised and stunned. Yeah, you should be.
You would have been great no matter what, buddy. You're good. It would have been fantastic. And if you didn't like it, we would have went on some other tangent talking about something else equally as important and equally as informative. But ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back the After Jam in 5 minutes. And if you don't want to miss any other times within the next 2 weeks of March 13th, March 20th with Dom, like, subscribe, and we'll see you later. So a cheers to everyone out there. Thank you very much. And Dom, hopefully we see you back right away. And everyone else, thank you very much.
How do I get back in?
Oh, you've got a new link. It's already sent out to you.
Okay, fine.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, bye.